Yeah, I think it's not the paper necessarily that you're leveraging. It's the
Ah,
experience, right? It's the
ah,
4 years that you are leveraging,
yes.
and then once you get that paper, that
Mm-hmm.
gives you autonomy, voice, and choice.
Mm-hmm.
Give an example. I don't think he'll mind me sharing, but in terms of a Mister, Mansa Joseph, who is a Mister graduate from Clemson University,
Mm-hmm.
became acquainted with real estate while at Clemson University.
Mm-hmm.
And so Massa leveraged that experience from his collegiate years, and leveraged it. So when he became a educator, uh, he was able to make a salary uh, as an educated black male that he probably would not have been able to make had he not had a degree. Okay, so Mansa, combining the experience and a degree, decided not to build a house upon entering into the education field. He decided to wait, and so Mansa had a roommate for 3 years as he uh, entered into his profession.
Mm-hmm.
After the 3 years, Mansa then bought a duplex, bought that duplex, flipped it, and then bought another duplex. Flipped that duplex and then bought a beautiful lake home in Columbia, South Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and it's now in Airbnb business. And so, if it had not been for the opportunity to be exposed to um, those folks on Clemson University's campus,
Mm-hmm.
and him leveraging his degree early on to make more money,
Mm-hmm.
he would not be in a position to be a landlord and to run several successful Airbnbs and have the beautiful home that he has.
So college and the degree or the obtaining of the degree is not again about the paper, but it's about the environment, the experience, and the connections, and the people that you get a chance to be around, and how it opens up your mind to different opportunities and different things. It's all about that, and not just a piece of paper. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
It,
I think.
it's about both.
Okay.
It's about both. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna say something that I think I hope will make sense because it's something that I said when I was down at I was at the Summer Leadership Institute, and they asked the site coordinators to stand up and say something during the session that we have there. And I made this statement or this analogy to them, and I'm not sure if they even got what I was trying to say. I heard a guy say, I can't remember where I read this or something, but I heard a guy say, he was an entrepreneur, and he said, as an entrepreneur, you should strive to make $1 million. Like every day, you should get up and grind and hustle to get to that point where you make $1 million as an entrepreneur in your business. And he said that once you get that $1 million, you should just give it away,
Mm,
right? He said, because it's not about the $1 million, it's about what you have to become to get the $1 million.
mhm,
Right. It's all of the things that I've got to fix in my life. I've got to become a different person. I got to learn how to talk different. I got to learn to change my mindset. I got to learn how to change my skill set, my tool set. All those things I've got to change within myself so I can get to the $1 million. So his point is, it wasn't really never about the $1 million, because I can make $1 million over and over and over again if I learn how to use my skill set, my tool set,
mhm,
my connections, and all those things. And I think at least that's what I think a degree should be. It's not about necessarily getting the paper. It's about necessarily what I've got to become to get the paper.
mhm.
I got to become a certain kind of reader, a certain kind of critical thinker. I got to become a certain kind of person to get to that spot. And once I get that, everything else opens up to me, and then I can use all of that leverage to get to where I need to be successful. Does that resonate with you and make sense to what I'm saying about that?
It certainly does, and that's true for anything. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, the process of being educated is the process of understanding how to think and how to interact with literature, culture, and people. So, I don't think you're off base on that. Not at all. Um, uh, I think you're spot on.
Okay. All right. All right. I'm gonna ask a final wrap up, a couple of questions, then we're gonna get you off here. So the last thing I'll ask, or the next to the last thing I'll ask is, we've talked about education, we've talked about its value, K through 12 and higher ed. Uh, but you notice that there are still a lot of teachers, excuse me, still a lot of teachers who are leaving the classroom. Me and my wife just had a discussion about that this morning, about there's so many teachers who are just quitting, just walking out. There's a shortage. in our state, if I'm not mistaken, and probably even across the country.
Mhm.
What do you think is some of the main factors if college is valuable, if education is valuable, if it does give you the tools to leverage that we've been talking about? Why are teachers deciding, okay, I'm out, I'm leaving this industry or this profession? Why do you think is some of the main factors that they're doing that?
Man, there are a couple of reasons. There are a couple of things, and when you deal with the intersectionality of human and human experiences, such as what educators have to do in a school building, it just doesn't become as cut and dry to create uh, the equation of if education is this, then why is this happening? There are other factors involved that have nothing to do with a degree or an individual's educational experience, because there are other things involved. And so as complex as the question you're asking, I think the answer is equally complex. And so there are a couple of things that I believe are happening. Number one, I think explicit to the craft of being a teacher, and wanting to get results there, I think there are some things that teacher education programs are missing. And I would like to touch bases on a few of those. For starters, um, I think it's worth noting that uh, America's public education system is the largest social reform that we've ever attempted to
Mm-hmm.
tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And this institution has been around for nearly or well over 200 years. Um, Nearly 200 years. And so, with this institution of public education, we have to sort of think through this in a very critical and a matter of fact way. And so, if I'm attempting to create something for the masses, I'm going to create something that's beneficial for most people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
most people, most folks who were a part of public education over the last century or so were people who had a different upbringing and different experience than what we currently have. I like to reference the bell curve in terms of if you are having to create something to benefit the majority of people, your program is going to be geared towards the largest representation in terms of population. So you're going to aim for the middle to impact the most people.
Mm-hmm.
And so those who were a part of American public education system were mostly rural, mostly white, and that was most of America then. However, most of America now, looking at the most recent demographic studies, America is becoming more gray,
Mm-hmm.
more brown, and more poor. And so, two of those factors really impact the quality uh, and impact the kind of student that walks through the door
Mm-hmm.
in our public education system. But we have a system that was curated around more rural and more white experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And some would dare say middle class because the money that was needed then is different from the money that's needed now to make ends meet. But that's a whole different conversation. And so the system is turning out a product to serve a demographic of people that no longer exists in our public school system.
True.
Or if they exist, it exists in small pockets. And we know those places because those are the places where um, you can still see Andy uh, walking down the street with his fishing pole, whistling to the local water hole. But for the most part, those schools, those communities are becoming smaller and smaller. That's one. Number two, there's a tremendous gap in reality and expectations. And so, what ends up happening in our pre-service institution in American public education system at whole, in large, is there's never really been an expectation for poor black or brown children to learn at a high level.
So true.
That is just the matter of fact of
So true.
things. So one may ask, well, how can you make such a bold declaration? Well, I can make a bold declaration because over 60 years ago, we figured out how to split the atom. Mr. Keenan, have you ever seen an atom?
No, sir.
Have you ever seen one? I've never seen an atom.
No, sir.
You can't even see it. But we figured out how to split it
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
create the atomic bomb. And then we also figured out how to fuse it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But beyond that, Mr. Keenan, that's phenomenal in itself. But we also figured out how to fly.
Mm-hmm.
We figured out how to go to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
We've measured the galaxy. We know the very depths of the sea. We know we've measured the earth. Heck, we've even measured the sun. We've measured the moon.
Mm-hmm.
There's very little that we know as mankind. Truly, in terms of all that we know, in terms of our intelligence, truly, we are indeed in God's image. We break it down for you even more, Mr. Keenan. There's nothing that mankind has imagined that we've not been able to do. The only thing we've not been able to do is time travel. But we've got the formula for it. We just lack the physical structure to be able to execute the speed that is needed, demonstrated in the formula. Mr. Keenan, we've been able to verify Einstein's theory of relativity. We've also been able to determine truly what gravity is. We know now that gravity is time and space. We used to teach children that gravity is a force. Not true. So all that we know about this universe,
Mm-hmm.
we still only have 38% of black children in this country are reading on grade level.
Wow.
We still have roughly 53% of children who are of poverty reading on grade level. The truth of the matter is those identified groups are not proficient because we don't expect them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that a true definition of a problem is when reality and expectations are not congruent. And I teach this to my fifth graders every year, that if I go to Chick-fil-A right now, Mr. Keenan, it is now 12:20. And I'm going to roll through that line and I'm going to ask them for a number one with mayo, add cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't have that number one with mayo and add my slice of cheese, we got a problem. Because my expectation is that on Friday at 12:20, Chick-fil-A got a chicken sandwich with mayo and cheese, and I'm supposed to roll through, eat my sandwich, and be okay. That is the expectation. And when I go to Chick-fil-A today at 12:20, they're going to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not going to have a problem. But Mr. Keenan, when I go to Chick-fil-A in 2 days, and it's Sunday at 12:20, and they don't have my number one with mayo and cheese, we ought not have a problem because Chick-fil-A established the expectation that we are not open on Sundays. And so if I go to Chick-fil-A looking for a sandwich, Chick-fil-A ain't got a problem. I have a problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I don't understand the expectations and how expectations are matching with reality. And so the reason why our system struggles so much is because not everyone believes in the educability of poor children, be it poor white or poor brown or poor black. Not everyone believes in the educability of black children, and not everyone believes in the educability of brown children. That's why American education system is suffering. It is simply a matter of expectations. And so when teachers walk through the door of various schools across the country, and some who've been properly formed and some who've been malformed. Those who've been malformed simply want to come and love children, and they think that their love will somehow erase all of the issues that children have. That's foolishness. But then there are those who come in who quite honestly have the drive, the passion, and really want to shift the trajectory of children. And then they come into a system that does not have the expectation that all children will learn at a
Hmm.
high level. And they become extremely frustrated with the system because it becomes clear that you don't really want these children to learn. You really want them quiet. You really want them pacified. And so in some cases, educators struggle with that. For those who've been malformed, they struggle with the ideal of the expectations that we put on teachers to ensure that they are producing students who are better suited as a result of their learning.
You're saying all the stuff you're saying here is gonna it could come off as being extremely controversial to some, because what I think I hear you saying is that the problem with our educational system is that when it was first written to be a system in the first place, it was written for, and I'm just going to say it as blunt as I can, it was written predominantly for white people. And now that we have a different demographic coming through the system, it can't handle that because of it wasn't never originally set to be for those people or to have those people succeed in it. Is that what you're saying? And is that what I'm hearing you say?
Partially, in that
Okay.
in that the pre-service undergraduate institutions, in many ways, are still developing educators using antiquated theories and
Hmm.
philosophies that they probably won't see in a vast majority of American schools. Now, in terms of the actual school system, in terms of expectations, I do want to make clear it is not just a system level expectation that's causing the achievement gap. It is also an individual student expectation.
Hmm.
It is also a family expectation, and is also a teacher expectation. It is because the student, poor black and brown children, oftentimes do not expect themselves to perform at a high level. The mama and the daddy and the families of poor black and brown children oftentimes do not expect their child to perform at a high level.
Hmm.
And when those poor black and brown children walk into an education system, because of what we've been exposed to in our pre-service institutions, we are also not expecting those students to perform at a high level. And so that's what I'm saying, in
Yeah.
that everyone shares blame in creating this landscape of low expectations for poor children, brown children, or black children. And so everyone, not just the public education system, needs to hold and come to the altar. Families need to come to the altar too, as well as students themselves, for having such low expectation for themselves.
Wow. Okay. I've never heard it explained that way before, and that makes perfect sense to me. It really does. So, wow.
Let me give you. I'm gonna give you a true story. I was at Morris College, and we had a. I mean, he was brilliant, Dr. Reginald Best, brilliant mind, just unbelievably gifted. Dr. Best held, I think, several PhDs. He was that bad of a guy, right? And so I think he had a PhD in Spanish, German, and I believe one other he was
Wow.
very fluent in. An unbelievably gifted mind. But he also had a tremendous amount of arrogance about himself, and I would imagine being a black male with Dr. Best's experience, he was much older than most on campus. That in so many ways he was probably formed to create this aura of arrogance about himself as a defense mechanism. So I won't go too deeply into criticizing Dr. Best in that manner because I don't know his experiences.
Hmm.
But I will say he had a way of doing things and kind of irritating people and really trying to call, it was kind of calling you up to the mountain. And so he would do this thing in his Spanish class. He would give a pretest,
Hmm.
and he would tell his students, if you don't get at least 20% of these questions correct, you don't need to take Spanish. You need to withdraw from my class and go take another foreign language. So Dr. Best administers the pretest, and Mr. Keenan, uh, Spanish, yet alone. I mean, I'm still trying to learn English. At 36 years old with a doctorate degree, growing up poor and rural, there's still some some subject verbs that I'm working on to make sure they agree. But nonetheless, so I took the pre-assessment. He brings it back, and Dr. Best scored my assessment, Mr. Keenan, and I think I had maybe 0.2 of a point. I mean, it was bad, right? And so, along with passing out your test results, he would also issue you a transfer request form that he had already signed that you needed to take to the head dean's office to transfer to another foreign language. Well, he had completely slaughtered everyone with this assessment. And so I'm sitting there in class looking at my score and transfer requests. And so the thing about it at this time was if you had to take another foreign language, you had to go back to French 1, then take French 2, and then you would be done with foreign languages. And by this time, I wasn't going to do that. So all of my friends in class are panicking because we all failed it. I think there were only 3 students in the whole class who had a reasonable score worthy enough to actually stay in Dr. Best's Spanish class. So we're all panicking. Man, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So he didn't even teach that day. That day was all about getting your test score and going to walk over across campus to transfer from his class. And so I sat there, Mr. Keenan. The whole hour, I just sat there in his class. And I waited until class was over. And I followed him to his office. And he goes to his office. I knock on his door. You know, what do you want? Come on in. I said, hey, Dr. Best. He says, did I grade something wrong? Do you have a problem with your score? I said, no, sir. I don't have a problem with my score. He says, okay, then what's the issue then, Mr. Clark? I said, I just have a question for you. He said, what's the question? I said, Dr. Best. He says, what? I said, can you teach? He looked at me. He said, excuse me? I said, can you teach? He said, of course I can. I said, well, I can learn. I'll see you next week. Right? And so, and so it's that level of expectation that we have to have for ourselves and for our children in our schools. Can you teach? If the answer is yes, and we truly believe that all children can learn, then what in the ham sandwich are we talking about? Get yourself in that classroom, deconstruct these standards, and teach these babies how to read, how to compute mathematically, how to think like a scientist, and how to question like a historian. And when we do that, there goes that achievement gap. It erases itself. Mr. Keenan, when I became principal at the Cleveland Academy of Leadership, our science achievement was at 5%. It is now at 55%. When I became principal 5 years ago, our reading proficiency was at 21%. It is now at 51.3%. When I became principal, our math proficiency was at 17.7%. It is now at 59.6%. That does not happen unless someone believes in the educability of our children. That does not happen unless someone, not just me, I'm not referencing myself, but I'm referencing the dedicated servant leaders in this building who call themselves teachers, coming into this building 180 days a year, committed to breaking down barriers, committed to closing the achievement gap, and committed to ensuring that our children have a better quality of life by giving them what they need. Remember, Mr. Keenan, this school was a failing school for 23 consecutive years. For 23 consecutive years, it ranked as the nation and South Carolina's worst performing school. That does not happen when we as Americans believe that these children should have been educated at a very high level. So then you may question, well, how do I know that's the case? I know it's the case because if these scores existed at one of our more affluent schools that I will not name, the city would have been on fire. The city would have been on fire. But
because it was at that school and it was a predominantly Black and brown student school, the expectations were not there for it to excel at all. So they just left it there.
Correct. The expectations were not there for anyone.
Yeah.
The children didn't have the expectation. The family didn't have the expectation, and the school system and the teachers didn't have the expectations. That's what this all boils down to.
So merely by you coming in and having the expectation and then making the community around the school have the expectation is what turned the school around, just on expectation alone?
Not me, but we.
Okay.
We.
But the turning point was the fact of the changing of the expectation is what made Cleveland Academy excel.
That is at the very core of what we do. It's a matter of expectations. We are expecting children to learn at a high level here.
And expecting teachers to teach.
We are expecting it. There's just no other way to exist here. I tell students, I tell parents, and I tell the teachers. This school, roughly 40,000 square feet, from the stop sign that's in the parking lot to the biscuit that's currently in the freezer in the cafeteria. Everything here on this campus is here for one reason: the educability of children. And if anything or anyone here is not willing to do that for those 180 days from 7:30 to 3 o'clock, you can't be here. Mm-hmm. It's just that simple. This institution is here for children to learn. And so we're not babysitting for 5%. We are teaching for 85% or more of our children to be on grade level. That's what we're doing here. And so now the expectation will guide everything else. Your why guides your how, your why guides your what, your why guides your when, your why guides your where. And so because of our expectations, because we shifted our expectations, we also knew that we had to do something different in terms of our instruction, our curriculum, and the support that our children would receive. And so I'm immensely grateful and proud that God saw fit for me to be here in position. And I didn't have to be principal. I would have been happy as AP and we've gotten our first excellent report card. I would have been happy as a second grade teacher to have obtained our first excellent report card. But God saw fit for me to be in position for this to happen when it happened and where it happened. And because of that, I'm grateful for it. And I think we stand as a beacon of hope in a school that has a poverty index, Mr. Keening, of 93%. We have a transiency index of 77%, and we have an absenteeism index of 84%. Cleveland, despite being the second smallest school in the district last year, had a third. We owned a third of all threat risk assessments in the school district. So despite being the second smallest school, more than a third of all threat risk assessments, meaning these are all the times where children said they wanted to kill or harm themselves or kill or harm someone else. Some of them resulted in emergency room visits. Wow. Despite those barriers that our children face, despite the child molestation cases, abuse and neglect, we are still able to produce meaningful results for our students here. And it's a matter of expectations. So we don't coddle. We do not expect them to fail. We know that if we're going to break these cycles of abuse, neglect, illiteracy, poverty, they're going to have to get educated at a high level so that they can become critical thinkers, so that they can become the leaders, have choice and voice to, again, improve the quality of life, not only for themselves, but for their own children. Nothing to me has been more heartbreaking than seeing 3 generations living in the same subsidized housing complex. That means to me that for 3 generations, our school system failed that family. Because if we had done what we were supposed to do and had given them the tools that they needed, it would have been 1 generation.
Wow. So profound. I normally ask for closing statements, but I think you've closed it out well. I think what you're saying is very profound. I think if every teacher, every educator could get that concept of expectation and servanthood, which is what Mr. teaches all the time, the dedicated servant leader, I think our school systems could be better. So thank you, Dr. Clark. I certainly appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. We could talk forever. And maybe you and I do get together because you've inspired me and reignited my flame for education, where it was kind of flickering there for a moment. So maybe you and I need to get together and talk some, maybe off of this, and just hear some more about some things that you just talked about. Would inspire me some more. So I appreciate that. I really do. All right, so that's it for today. Thank you guys for listening. This has been The Educator's Voice with Marquise Clark, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys again next time. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.